spent your whole life trying to be someone, but you never stopped to ask who that someone was. Because deep down, something inside you always knew that this identity you learned to wear wasn't yours. It was a reflex, a strategy, an adaptation shaped by silences, absences, and glances that taught you more than words. You didn't become who you are because you chose to. You became who you were because it was necessary. Because at some point, being whole was too dangerous. And so you divided yourself, shaped yourself, erased yourself into parts. You assumed roles that guaranteed love, approval, emotional survival, and it worked, to a point. But now you feel stuck in a loop, as if you're always manifesting the same versions of life, the same patterns of pain, the same answers from the universe. And the most disconcerting thing is that you've tried everything: affirmations, techniques, visualizations, clear intentions, and yet something doesn't seem to budge. Or worse, it does, but drags you back to the same place with a new mask. Frustration disguises itself as guilt. Your mind asks what you're doing wrong. But maybe it's not a matter of doing. Maybe it's a matter of being. And maybe, and this may hurt, what you're being isn't you. There's a silent breaking point that many spiritual seekers reach. A point where noticing is no longer enough, where learning more isn't the answer. Because the problem isn't the content you consume, but the vibrational identity driving that consumption. You read about abundance, but it's the scarce self that reads. You practice forgiveness, but it's the wounded self still trying to deserve love that practices it. You try to co-create a new reality with the right tools, but with the wrong observer. And this is where everything gets stuck. Because reality, this thing you're trying to change, isn't shaped solely by your intentions. It's shaped by the frequency of the person trying. It responds to the field, not to the will. And if the field is governed by identity scripts you don't even know you carry, then everything you manifest is filtered by that old vibration. Everything you receive is a reflection of whoever is hidden vibrating behind the desire. These scripts aren't sentences, they're fields. They're invisible structures that organize your perception and shape what you think is possible. They're the reason you sabotage yourself when you get too close to what you want. They're the reason for the discomfort that arises when things start to go right. Because the part of you that's in charge doesn't want success, it wants familiarity. It wants the repetition of the familiar. Even if that familiarity is pain. Even if that script keeps you small. It's still safer than the emptiness of not knowing who you would be without it. Because the unknown is scary. Because leaving the script isn't just changing the narrative, it's dying to an identity. It's finding yourself without ground, without a name, without a story. And that's exactly why the universe hasn't yet delivered what you so desperately desire. Because the version of you that's asking for it isn't ready to receive it. Not because it's incapable, but because it's still collapsing reality based on a limited version of what it means to be you. But what if it's possible to let go? Not as if you're abandoning, but as if you're returning something that was never true. What if the scripts that bind you aren't eternal traumas, but merely vibrational responses waiting for presence? What if healing isn't in reprogramming every belief, but in stopping obeying that character that still thinks it needs to be accepted? There's a pause between the old and the new, a quantum space where the script hasn't yet been reactivated, and the true self can whisper. It's subtle, it's fleeting, and almost always ignored, but that's where everything begins to change. Not with force, not with techniques, but with the simple courage to not react as you always have, to not repeat the role, to become the observer who sees but doesn't play along, who embraces pain but doesn't attach an identity to it, who feels fear but doesn't transform it into a limit. This is ground zero, the void between script and essence, where the universe is still silent, awaiting its new frequency. And it is there, exactly there, that the mirror begins to move. Because the universe doesn't respond to who you want to be. It responds to who you are being now, even without realizing it. And maybe everything you've been feeling lately isn't failure nor stagnation, but an invitation to stop repeating, to stop being the reflection, and to finally begin to be the source. You've been conditioned to believe that reality is something solid, external, fixed, a ready-made world where you either fit in or fail. But what no one has taught you is that this reality you struggle with isn't something that exists outside of you. It's a projection, a perfectly faithful reflection of the observer you are being. Not what you say, not what you desire, but the internal field that vibrates behind it all. The universe, in its radical neutrality, doesn't listen to requests, it reads frequencies. It doesn't respond to your stated intention, it responds to the invisible self that is operating that intention. Vibration doesn't lie, and the identity script you carry is like a quantum filter. Everything you touch passes through it. Every decision, every reaction, every relationship, every attempt to manifest something new inevitably slips through this ancient, invisible, and persistent mold. And perhaps that's why certain pains recur, even when the surface of your life changes. That's why scarcity returns. That rejection reappears with a new face, that the almost repeats like an echo, because what still vibrates behind the desire is the same character, a learned self, an identity script constructed for survival but maintained by inertia. And you're not to blame for that. You didn't invent the script. It was sewn into you by 1,000 small gestures, words, and omissions. By the way you were seen or not seen, by the affection you had to earn, by the silence you had to endure, by the adaptation that kept you loved but fragmented. And so your field began to emit signals, signals of who you needed to be to continue belonging. And these signals became your identity. But now you want more. You want to expand, create, live a reality that feels authentic, abundant, aligned with something greater. But to do so, you need to understand, what's limiting you isn't the world. It's the invisible script you still carry as if it were you. And letting go of this script isn't easy, because it's not a belief. It's an identity, an energetic signature, an entire vibrational field built around a logic. It's safer to be this way. And your reality responds to this logic, no matter how much you wish otherwise. Therefore, the first liberation is not external. It doesn't come from changing the environment, cutting ties, or seeking new techniques. It begins with a radical question. Who is operating your field? Who's making the decisions? Who's feeling the fear, desiring change, asking for answers? If it's the same character who learned to hide, then the reality you call blocked is actually being true to your quieter frequency, true to your oldest vibrational identity. The universe isn't punishing you, it's mirroring you. And when you truly feel this, not as a theory but as a vibrational observation, everything changes. Because you stop forcing the universe to deliver something your field isn't emitting. You begin to realize that manifestation isn't a technique, it's a coherence. It's the collapse of reality from the inner place from which you observe. If that place is still governed by fear, effort, scarcity, the universe responds with more experiences that confirm that field. It doesn't matter how many times you visualize, affirm, or wish. The script always wins until it's dissolved. But here's the most important point. The script isn't you. It's just the first breakdown, the first version of identity you had to construct to survive. And now you're no longer in that same time. That environment no longer exists. Those people are no longer there, but the script continues to vibrate as if they were. And that's what holds you back. You're not stuck in the past. You're stuck in the version of yourself that past demanded. And as long as it's in control, reality will continue to deliver you an old reflection. Not because you're wrong, but because the universe is impeccably precise. It doesn't deliver what you want. It delivers what you are being. And maybe that's the real invitation you've been feeling lately. The discomfort, the stagnation, the frustration. Maybe all of this isn't a mistake, but a call, a vibrational collapse asking for space, a silent reminder that you're no longer that character, and that the only thing separating you from the new reality is the courage to let the old observer leave the scene. You were taught to believe that the universe is external, a stage, an impersonal system of causes and effects, a precise mechanism to be adjusted, prayed for, negotiated. And even though you've now discovered words like frequency, field, and manifestation, something inside you still tries to create from the old paradigm. You still think there's a world out there waiting for your right action, so it can respond benevolently. But this logic has never brought you peace, because it's backward. Reality doesn't respond when you get it right. It responds when you do dot aligns. And that difference is everything. Because aligning isn't about controlling. It's not about insisting, forcing, or obsessively seeking the perfect technique. Aligning is about recognizing who's watching. It's about realizing that no matter what you want to manifest, if the identity you desire still vibrates scarcity, fear, rejection, or control, the universe has no choice. It will collapse a reality compatible with that field, because the universe has no morals, it has no judgment, it simply obeys the vibration. It's not punishing you, it's confirming the version of you that's collapsing the field. And that is both scary and liberating. Because if you've already created an entire life from unconscious scripts, imagine what happens when you start emitting conscious signals. When the observer, who was once a shadow conditioned by the past, becomes a living presence. When instead of trying to control what comes, you become the kind of consciousness that to make sense to what you want to achieve. It's not about pulling something into your reality, it's about being the place where it naturally exists. And this is where physics meets spirit. Because manifestation is not a technique of conquest, it is a consequence of vibrational identity. The collapse of the wave, that moment when one reality among infinite ones becomes yours, happens not when you want it badly enough, but when it is true. It's not desire that creates, it's the coherence between the one who desires and what is being observed. You may desire love, but if the one who desires is the identity that believes it doesn't deserve to be chosen, the field will respond with absence. You may desire abundance, but if the part emitting the desire vibrates effort and sacrifice, the field delivers scarcity. You may even desire freedom, but if the vibration is fear of failure, the universe will create structures that contain you, not out of malice, but out of resonance. Reality is much more sensitive than you imagined. It doesn't respond to phrases or mental images. It responds to the vibrational signature emitted beneath everything, to your presence, to your internal state. And this signature is shaped, almost always, by who you believe you are. That's why identity scripts are so dangerous. They create the world before you even act. They automatically collapse realities, because they are the origin point of your entire vibration. And the cruelest part is that, because they're invisible, these scripts operate in the dark. They act like lenses. They shape your perception. You think you're being intuitive, but you're just reacting conditionedly. You think you're having a bad feeling, but it's just the old field trying to maintain its zone of control. The script doesn't want to see you expand, it wants to see you safe, even if safety means maintaining the familiar suffering. And you, who think you're listening to yourself, are only listening to the old self that learned to survive in emotional scarcity. But there comes a moment, a threshold point, where something shifts, where, even without understanding everything, you begin to tire of the cycle. You begin to distrust the repetition. You begin to feel that no matter how many techniques you do, there's something deeper still operating without your permission. And in that moment, you don't need to know its name. You don't need to understand all the concepts. You just need to stop, observe, and ask yourself, who is choosing now? This simple yet radical question is the beginning of dissolution. Because where there is conscious observation, the script loses power. It can't bear to be seen, because it feeds on unconscious repetition. It needs your autopilot. It thrives on your absence. But when you look, feel, observe, something changes, because the one looking is no longer the character. It's you, whole, present, real, and the universe begins to rearrange its particles to reflect this new presence. Not like magic, but as a consequence, as an answer, like a silent mirror that has always been before you, waiting for the true observer to finally open their eyes. This is where the biggest shift happens, when you stop waiting for reality to change first, when you realize, almost painfully, that the universe isn't behind schedule, it's you who's in a loop. And not by choice, but by vibrational inertia. There's a field within you that's playing the same script, like background music you no longer consciously hear. But it's there, playing the notes of your childhood, your traumas, your unintegrated selves. And this silent melody shapes everything you see, feel, and attract. That's why you keep collapsing into realities that don't match your desires. Because your desires come from the conscious, but the collapse comes from vibration, and it's determined by what hasn't yet been healed. This is the point many fail to reach, because it requires more than intention. It requires a willingness to face what still lives within you as truth, to look at the parts that still believe love must be earned. That freedom has a price. That pleasure demands guilt. That peace is only achieved through effort. These are deep-rooted vibrational truths, and the universe responds to them with pinpoint precision. Because it doesn't mirror your hope, it mirrors your coherence. And as long as the part that calls for a new reality is still stuck in the old script, the reflection will be the same. The frame may change, the faces may change, but the pattern remains until the observer changes. And the observer doesn't change with information. It changes with presence, with silence, with a willingness to feel discomfort without running away. Because this discomfort is the portal. It's the friction between what you've always been and what you're ready to be. It's the script's breaking point, the most fragile part of the old structure. And that's why it hurts. Because the old vibrational identity is trying to stay alive. It knows that if you don't react, don't repeat, don't justify, it will die. And that's the grief you feel. The grief of leaving behind who you thought you needed to be to survive. But here's the most beautiful paradox. The universe doesn't require you to fight the script. It just needs you to stop being it. It just needs you to observe it. With love, with lucidity, with compassion. Because it's in this non-reactive gaze that the field begins to reorganize itself. You don't need to destroy your old identity. You just need to stop feeding it with your vibration. When you don't react, don't reinforce, don't repeat, the script begins to dissolve. Because it was sustained only by your belief. And reality begins to give way. Slowly, like someone testing the waters before delivering another collapse. Situations that once held you back suddenly lose their power. People who invalidated you now distance themselves or transform themselves. What seemed blocked begins to flow. Not because the universe finally listened, but because the playing field finally shifted, and the universe, as always, merely reflected. Most people remain stuck because they wait for the external to change first. They wait for a sign, an opening, a miracle. But the universe doesn't work that way. It doesn't deliver a new reality to the old self. It only mirrors it. And if you're vibrating from the conditioned version of yourself, the version that learned to protect itself, to fight, to prove itself, then that's what the universe will return to you. Tests, struggles, threats. Not because you made a mistake, but because you're still collapsing life with an observer that isn't you. It's the wounded you, adapted, conditioned. And the good news, the most radical and liberating news, is that you can change this observer now. You don't need to understand everything, purge everything, or reprogram everything. You just need to stop identifying with the script. Breathe, observe, feel, and choose. Not the new thought, but the new place from which you observe. Because it is this place, this silent point within you, that decides the vibration of the field. And the field decides everything. It's not about effort, it's about vibrational origin. The collapse of reality doesn't happen when you try. It happens when you are. When you occupy the version of yourself that is compatible with what you desire. And this version isn't forced, it already exists, it's superimposed. It's just waiting for you to stop collapsing the old version so it can finally emerge. You grew up hearing that observing was a passive act, that looking at the world was merely witnessing what was already there. That reality is solid, external, immutable, a sequence of causes and effects that unfolds, indifferent to your presence. But quantum physics came along and shattered that comfort. It didn't just challenge this narrative, it destroyed it. Because at the most fundamental level of existence, to observe is to intervene. To look is to change, and not symbolically, but physically. Measured, repeated, unquestionable. The double-slit experiment is not a myth. It is a scientific mirror of what spiritual masters have always said, that you are not separate from the world, that you are not just watching reality unfold. You are creating what it is at the very moment you observe it. When a particle is thrown against a barrier with two slits, unobserved, it behaves like a wave, like possibility, like all versions of itself at once. But the moment you try to measure it, the moment you demand to know which slit it went through, the magic disappears. The particle chooses. Possibility collapses. The mystery closes. The universe rearranges itself to offer an answer. And the answer only exists because you asked, because your consciousness demanded definition. This phenomenon isn't metaphorical. It's the cornerstone of modern physics. And what it says, both brutally and lyrically, is reality does not exist until you look at it, until you realize it, until you choose it, consciously or unconsciously. The world you think you're living in isn't a predetermined timeline. It's a sea of possibilities waiting to collapse. And the one who collapses is you. But here's what almost no one realizes. If every observation generates a collapse, then who observes matters more than what is observed, and who has been observing your life so far? Which identity has been the silent observer? Which script has been filtering your perception? Because it is this invisible you that still carries ancient truths, that is collapsing the current reality. You are not seeing the world as it is. You are seeing the world as your inner observer defines it, as your emotional lens allows, as your vibrational field distorts it, and the universe, faithful as a mirror, responds. It doesn't create for you. It merely offers reflections. You look, and it shapes itself. You change your perspective, and it rearranges itself. You insist on seeing scarcity, and it provides proof of it. You choose to see yourself as small, and it constructs a reality compatible with that small frequency. Because in the absence of an awakened observer, the universe continues to collapse on an old non-observer basis. No script. But if even a particle waits to exist until it is observed, what about you? What if your new life, your expansion, your freedom, are not distant, nor blocked, nor wrong? What if they already exist, like wave-like possibilities all around you, waiting only for a new look? Not a superficial look, not a forced look, but a look coming from another point of origin, from another vibration, from another you. You don't need to convince the universe to give you anything. You just need to be the one that the universe recognizes as compatible with what you want. Because the universe doesn't deliver based on merit. It delivers based on vibrational coherence between observer and observed. And when this inner observer shifts, when it stops being the rejected child, the struggling adult, the survivor, and becomes the conscious, present, whole being, the reality around it shifts with it. People start acting differently. Answers arrive, synchronicities appear. Because now it's a new observer collapsing a new field. And the rules change, not because the universe has changed, but because the vantage point has changed. Physics and spirituality, long treated as opposites, meet here. Both say in different languages the same thing. You are the point of contact between what exists and what is possible, and that point changes everything. It always has. Now that you begin to understand that it is the observer who defines collapse, the most important question of all inevitably arises. Who is watching through me right now? And this question isn't intellectual, it's vibrational. It can't be answered with words. It's felt in the body. It reverberates in the field. Because there's something very subtle happening all the time. While you say you want freedom, perhaps it's the self conditioned by fear that's asking for it. While you visualize abundance, perhaps it's the scarce self trying to compensate for a void. While you dream of true love, perhaps it's the wounded self seeking to be chosen so it doesn't have to choose itself. And the universe, sensitive as skin, senses the truth behind the request. This is where you start to track the scripts. They don't scream, they whisper through your desires, they hide in your efforts. They disguise themselves as motivation, as haste, as reason. And that's why so many still live in a loop, because they're trying to co-create from a layer that isn't the real self. They're trying to change the film by changing the subtitles, but keeping the same projector. Look honestly. Who despairs when someone doesn't reply to their message? Who feels guilty when resting? Who feels small when faced with the possibility of success? Who, faced with freedom, is afraid of getting lost? These questions aren't meant to accuse you. They're meant to wake you up. Because each of them points to a specific observer, a script, a frequency that, while operating, will collapse reality out of fear, not truth. And if you're willing to look, you'll see that these scripts follow patterns. The "I need to deserve it" script makes you attract situations in which you give too much of yourself, hoping to be validated. The "it's dangerous to be seen" script leads you to sabotage opportunities every time you start to shine. The "love takes effort" script keeps you stuck in dynamics where you have to constantly prove your worth. And the cruelest? They are ancient, inherited, absorbed. They weren't born with you, but they live as if they were you, and so they continue to create. Tracking a script is not an act of war. It is an act of loving lucidity. You won't defeat it. You'll illuminate it, because it dissolves when it is no longer obeyed, when it is seen, felt, honored, but no longer followed. And you know a script has been activated when your reaction is automatic, when emotion takes over the body before the mind can choose. When you find yourself living the same story, with new scenarios, but the same pain. When the thing you really wanted now scares you. When the other person's silence becomes a sentence and not just a silence. These are all signs, not of failure, but of activation. It's the old field trying to stay alive, because for him, vibrating the same is security, even if it means suffering, even if it prevents life from happening. But here's your chance, because now you are watching, no longer like someone who is inside the script, but as someone who sees it without collapsing it immediately. And in that small space between stimulus and reaction, there is freedom. Freedom not to repeat, of not vibrating the same, of not collapsing the old pattern once again. You don't need to know the name of the script. Just feel that he is not you, that there is something vaster, more silent, more present, waiting to take its place, and that something doesn't need to justify anything. It just needs to be felt and chosen. You don't manifest what you desire. You manifest what vibrates, and what vibrates, almost always, isn't what you think you're vibrating. Because true vibration doesn't reside in your words, nor in your conscious thoughts, much less in the techniques you practice with discipline. It settles in deeper places, in shadow zones, in memories you don't remember, in silences you inherited. And there, nameless and formless, scripts are created. Scripts are fields, not phrases, not isolated beliefs. They are complex frequencies that organize your reality field like an invisible magnet, pulling in everything that resonates with the logic it supports. They are like vibrational tracks. You walk, act, choose, feel, thinking you're free, but in reality, you're just repeating the pattern of the track they put you on back then. And the most disconcerting thing is that these tracks feel natural. They become you. You think it's your personality, your essence, your destiny. But everything that's happening is an unexamined continuation of an ancient breakdown. A breakdown that may not have even started with you, but which you vibrate as if it were your own. And that's why it's so difficult to change reality through effort. Because as long as the script is active, all effort will be interpreted and executed by him. You want to attract abundance, but the one who desires it is still the character who believes they are only worthy when they sacrifice. You ask for love, but the field issuing the request still believes that true affection is always conditional. You visualize freedom, but the underlying script tells you that freedom is selfishness, that being free is rejection, that shining brings punishment. And the universe, obedient as ever, responds to the actual emission, not to your stated desire. This is where the real transformation begins, when you stop trying to fix reality and begins to ask himself radically, who is watching all this inside me? It's not your mind that creates, it's the field that operates behind it. And this field is constantly collapsing possibilities based on scripts you've inherited, absorbed, and updated without realizing it. Do you want to know if you're under the control of a script? Look at your life, what repeats itself. What emotional patterns insist on returning in new guises? What sensations arise even when everything seems fine? Because the script always gives signs. It shows up in your inability to receive without guilt, in your tendency to hide when something starts to go right, in the silent fear of being rejected every time you take a stand, in the urgency that arises when the other person pulls away, in the chronic effort to be impeccable so as not to be abandoned, in the desperation to make yourself understood so as not to be silenced. All of these are expressions of scripts. They are vibrational traces. They are ancient voices infiltrating your now. And the most subtle thing is that these scripts don't stop you from wanting. They let you dream, but only within limits. They allow you to believe you can grow, as long as you don't go beyond the safe zone of the old narrative. They let you love, but only to the point where love doesn't challenge the pain you've learned to endure. They allow progress, but with automatic sabotage built in. Because the script's function isn't to make you happy, it's to keep you familiar. It delivers you exactly what you already know how to feel, even if it's anguish. Because the new is dangerous for the conditioned field. The new requires letting go of control. It requires trust. It requires disidentifying from the character who learned to survive. And here's the paradox. You only free yourself from the script when you stop fighting it, when you stop trying to defeat it, overcome it, erase its traces, because that actually reinforces it. Every time you try to control the script, you're acting from it. The key isn't to defeat it, it's to see. See without reaction, without rushing, without justifying, just observe. Feel what it produces in you and hold that space without collapsing. This is the true vibrational work. The non-doing that dissolves, the non-identification that deactivates. Because the script feeds on your belief that it is still you. And when you stop acting, when you breathe in the midst of the impulse, when you allow discomfort without escape, when you choose not to repeat, something shifts in the field. The structure loses strength, and the universe notices. Because now a new observer began to emerge, one who doesn't need to prove himself, who doesn't repeat pain as truth, who isn't confused by old stories. And this observer doesn't need to say anything. Your vibration is already enough to reprogram the collapse. Because the very moment you become presence instead of pattern, the mirror of the universe adjusts. It recognizes the new origin. It feels the difference and begins to reflect something else, not as a miracle, but as the inevitable consequence of a new vibrational center in action. There's an almost imperceptible moment when something inside you begins to shift. It's not an explosion. It's not a cinematic miracle. It doesn't come with bells, angels, or flashes. It's a longer breath. A silence that was once unbearable now becomes shelter. An absence of urgency where there was once despair. A strange, even disconcerting peace, because you're not used to living without the noise of the script. This is the beginning of the true vibrational collapse. The moment when the new observer begins to take up space. And at first, everything seems fragile. You still have one foot in each reality. You still hear the old voices telling you that this is nonsense, that it won't work, that you're deluding yourself. But something inside you no longer completely believes these voices. They still appear, but they no longer carry the same weight. You begin to suspect that perhaps they were never yours. And this small shift changes everything, because now you're the one following the script, not the other way around. The universe, in turn, responds precisely. The answers don't come as great external achievements yet. They come as subtle pattern distortions. You realize that the situation that would normally knock you down now only unbalances you. That trigger that would take you for days now lasts minutes. And you begin to witness in real time the dissolution of the vibrational narrative that previously governed your existence. The field begins to collapse from another place, from another source. And the signs come, not as a reward, but as a reflection. You meet someone new, and they don't trigger your need to prove anything. You're seen without asking. You receive without bowing. You say no and remain loved. You're alone and don't feel lonely. You gain something and don't feel guilty. And for a second, your body feels strange. Your ego is agitated. Your mind searches for the old script, but the new vibration is stronger, more coherent, more yours. And that's enough for the universe to understand. The vantage point has changed, and with it, the collapse changes. But here's something essential. You need to sustain the new field even when it hasn't yet proven itself, because that's where almost everyone falls. The conditioned mind wants immediate confirmation. It wants reality to show that it's working. But that's still the script playing out. It's still the frequency of doubt, control, and urgency. The new field is silent, confident, present. It doesn't require signs because he is the sign. He does not seek control because he is the origin. He doesn't react, he emanates. And sustaining this new vibrational identity requires intimacy with oneself. It requires detachment from time. It requires a radical trust that the universe isn't taking its time. It's just rearranging particles to reflect the new emission. Because the universe isn't in a hurry. It's precise. It needs the field to be stable, coherent, and whole so that the new reality can collapse with support. There's no point accessing the new if you can't to be the new for long enough for the reflex to consolidate. Therefore, at this point in your journey, you need to become your own temple, your own mirror. Stop searching outside and start holding within the space where the new field pulsates. And this space is built through silent practices, choosing non-drama, feeling without reaction, observing without control, being without fear, and above all, trusting, not in an external God, not in a technique, but in yourself, as a field, as a source, as a frequency. Because now you know, the universe doesn't deliver what you want, it delivers what you can sustain vibrationally. And if you still need reality as proof that you've changed, then you haven't changed yet. Because the one who needs proof is the old observer. The new one doesn't need certainty, it is certain. And in this place, everything begins to respond. Slowly at first, and then with synchronicities that seem magical. But they're not magic, they're physics. Field physics, coherence physics, quantum identity physics aligned with collapse. Because now, you're the one looking, and everything looks back. The new vibration isn't a peak. It's not a fleeting ecstasy that visits your meditation or spiritual practice and then leaves. The new vibration is a home, a ground, a field you begin to occupy until it becomes the ground you walk on, even when it rains, even when the pain returns, even when the old world tries to call you back, because he will call. Make no mistake, the old universe, collapsed for years based on the script, will still leave traces. There will still be people who treat you like the old you. There will still be vibrational invitations to repeat the pattern. Triggers, pressures, pains not completely resolved. But now, something has changed. You feel. You no longer have to react like before. You can simply choose. And that choice, which seems small, is actually the new code of the universe being written in real time. The old script fed on your haste, your guilt, your need to please, to prove yourself, to explain yourself. But now, you can breathe before responding. You can allow the silence to say what you once shouted. You can sit with the discomfort without running away. Because now you're no longer the character reacting to the scene. You're the observer vibrating the scene, creating it. And integration begins like this. No stage, no spectacle. It begins with how you wake up, how you deal with traffic, how you treat the body you inhabit, how you honor your energy in the face of someone who still lives by their script. It begins when you stop seeking approval in the eyes of others and start maintaining your frequency even when no one is looking. Because true reprogramming happens when you stay in the new vibration even when reality still seems old. This is the most delicate point and the most powerful. This is where many give up because the world outside hasn't changed yet. It still looks the same, it still presents challenges, but the field is no longer the same. And if you persist, if you remain faithful to the new vibrational origin you've chosen, everything around you will have to reconfigure itself. Not as a reward, but as an inevitable reflection. Because reality has no choice. It is a mirror, and a mirror cannot deny what is before it. But be careful. Integration isn't pretending to be okay. It's not ignoring the pain, nor is it masking the vibration. Integration is allowing yourself to be true within the new field. It's embracing yourself even when the old pattern tries to return. It's observing without following. It's feeling without getting lost. It's trusting that even stumbles are part of the collapse that's happening. Because yes, even stumbles have value when you observe them from the new you. You don't need to be vibrating 100% high for reality to start shifting. You just need to be present, choosing, breathing, interrupting the automatic, honoring every second you choose not to collapse from fear. Every moment you pause, every moment you become silent, every moment you say, I see you, script, but I'm something else now. And this silent fidelity to your new field becomes practice. It becomes routine. It becomes your body. And then you begin to live from a different place, to react differently, to choose without drama, to love without dependence, to say yes without selling out, to say no without blaming yourself, to withdraw without losing yourself, to show up without forcing yourself. This is the new you collapsing the new universe. It's not about grand feats. It's about small alignments, daily, profound, sustained. Because every vibrational choice made in the silence of your intimacy is a wave that reverberates in the field and collapses entire realities without you having to lift a stone. and suddenly the world changes. But not because you forced him. He changes because you changed. Because now what vibrates in you is true. It is presence. It's alignment. It is the new observer occupying its totality. And the universe, as always, just responds. You don't need to create anything. The reality you desire already exists. She is not in the future. She's here. Now. Like a wave-like possibility, waiting for you to choose it, not with words, not with affirmations, not with desire, but with presence. This is the most radical key. You don't manifest a new life, you become someone who is compatible with it. And this compatibility isn't something you force, it's something you embody, that you sustain, that you allow. The quantum field doesn't operate linearly. It doesn't operate under the logic of human time. It is simultaneous, timeless. It vibrates based on the coherence between who you are and what you are collapsing. Therefore, manifestation is not an external process. It is an internal revelation. What changes is not the world. It is the observer. And when the observer changes, everything changes. The you who still waits, who still searches, who still doubts, that you is still collapsing the old life. Because waiting is a vibration, searching is a frequency, doubt is a field. And the universe responds to this with precision. It shows you more of what you vibrate, not more of what you want. But when you let go of the script, when you abandon the character, when you stop identifying with the narrative of the suffering me, the me that needs to fight, the me that needs to be accepted, when you simply breathes from the vastness that is nameless, undefined, effortless, in that instant, you collapse a new reality. A reality where life doesn't have to be difficult, where love is not scarce, where success doesn't come as punishment, where freedom does not require guilt, where being you is enough. But understand, none of this comes from outside. None of this is given. All this already exists. You were just collapsing the other way around. And now you have learned to choose differently, to vibrate differently, to be different. Not because you became better, but because you're least what was never you. The reality that once seemed impossible is now approaching. Synchronicities intensify. The answers come effortlessly. Connections align without planning. You become a center of vibrational gravity that attracts everything that once seemed distant, because now you are the compatible field. And it doesn't end there. This becomes a way of life, if it exists, to co-create, because the universe is not a judge, it is a mirror. And now you know who's watching. What if all this isn't something new, but something old that you're just remembering? What if this feeling of truth pulsing in your chest right now is the voice of the being that was always there, suffocated by layers, distorted by expectations, forgotten by the versions that needed to exist for you to be accepted? What if you're not discovering anything, but just going back, coming home, to the center, to the place before names, before pain, before characters? This place that doesn't need to be defended, that doesn't need to be explained, that doesn't need to prove anything, because he's not trying to become he-and. And when you are in that place, there is no more fighting, there is no more rush, there is no more lack. There is only a stable, loving, present vibration. A vibration that sustains life as it is, but that at the same time collapses a reality where everything is lighter, simpler, more true. You don't need to know everything. You don't need to control everything. You just have to keep coming back. Coming back to yourself. Returning to the center. Returning to that silent origin point where the universe naturally aligns. Effortlessly, without techniques, without masks. Because when you are aligned with who you truly are, the world is organized around this. Nothing is stronger than someone who remembers who they are. And if at any point you forget, and you will, just stop, breathe, feel it, and remember, the universe does not respond to what you want. It responds to what you vibrate, and you can always choose to vibrate again, look again, collapse again. It all starts now.